Okay, I'd like to call to order the Finance and Facilities Committee meeting, February 28th. I apologize for delay in getting started.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Got a live streaming announcement to make first before we do anything else. Meetings of the Mechanicsburg Area School District Board of Directors are being recorded and live streamed for the purpose of transparency and increased public access. The live stream, along with recordings from previously held meetings, can be found on the school board's YouTube channel. On to new business, item 2.01, high school construction update, swimming pool. Dr. Leidy?
Yes, thank you. And thanks for everyone's patience here this evening as we come into this meeting. Tonight, we are talking about the part of the high school project that was separated from Project 2, and that was our swimming pool conversation. Just to bring it back in perspective for everyone, obviously we are wrapping up the addition to the high school, the classroom addition and the student services and offices section of the building, and we are moving into Project 2 pretty rapidly. As part of Project 2, we stepped back a little bit around the pool discussion and wanted to see how the bids came in on Project 2. Based on those bids, we felt comfortable moving forward with more on our swimming pool. And so Mr. Haynes is here tonight along with Mr. Longwell, and between the three of us, we'll go through this presentation for the board. Do you have the clicker?
There we go.
So Mr. Longwell and I'll tag team this if you want to go ahead and.
So as Dr. Leidy said, we've been, as we finished our elementary projects and turned our attention to the secondary buildings, the high school was the next priority. Having already looked at the renovation of the existing building and awarded those bids, the final piece of the high school then was coming back and looking at where are we with our swimming pool. And so that's the focus of tonight's update. And so just a quick, by way of agenda, a quick look at what we'll discuss this evening, and that includes the project considerations for the pool, the design process and project financing, which is really the money that we have available for the project. The construction budget is what I would call more of the estimate of, based on the design work that has progressed to this point, where are we with the estimate of the cost? And we'll kind of compare that a little bit to what's the money that we have available with project financing. And then a review of the layout and renderings for that pool area. And then as a final piece, the project timeline, where we're looking at not only completing the design and the construction documents, but then moving toward bidding the project and then actually putting a shovel in the ground and how we would progress through that. So as we looked at the pool area, the groups that we kind of considered as far as the use of the pool, we looked at things connected to our academic programs, so what's happening during the school day or maybe outside of it. We also looked at athletics, we looked at recreation, and then also community use of the pool. And so as we began the initial design phase with Crabtree, we came up with a concept, we looked at some estimates, we then pulled in a pool consultant. And while we were working on refining the design, we were talking to these stakeholder groups and thinking about what are the needs around the pool and how does that influence the design process, all the while knowing that we still have to think about where are we with project financing, the money we have available, and then also the construction estimate as we were fine-tuning that design. So a little bit of an update on the design process and the project financing. And so as the board had authorized us to move forward with a more in-depth design of the pool, probably recall that we had developed a conceptual drawing with Crabtree and an initial budget to say, here's kind of what we're looking at. We would like to bring in a specialist that works on pools and then go deeper with that. So we had received that authorization to design, and then as we've worked through the design process, we've obviously involved Crabtree Rohrbaugh as our architect, but also the pool consultant of Weston and Sampson, an organization that specializes in the design of pools. In terms of the financing plan, this is really the money that we've allocated or earmarked for our projects. And so at the high school, Project 2, was $50 million. And out of that $50 million, we know the high school renovation came in close to 42 in terms of a total estimate. And so that left $8 million for the new swimming pool and the conversations that we were having around the design, looking at things with our stakeholders. And so $8 million is that money that we have available for this project that we've been looking at.
Can I ask, how did we identify the pool consultant? Where did they, have you worked with them before?
We have, yes. We worked in the past. Typically with a pool, it's a pretty specialized design element of a building. It's like hiring, let's say, a mechanical engineer for the HVAC systems. We would hire a consultant who, they're not only designing the shell of the pool, they're designing all the systems, the pool pack, and all the things that are associated with the pool. And then what we're doing is, of course, incorporating that into the shell, into the actual natatorium. So we're kind of working primarily in the natatorium and that space, and then they're designing the physical shell of the pool.
Like everything wet and you're like everything dry.
Right. Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
So where were we at, around 5 million before?
So early on in the process, it's been an evolution, I would say. If you go back, we had kind of looked at a couple options. One was a new pool option or renovating the existing pool. And so some of the new pool options were initially around that 5-6 million, I think. But then as we really looked deeper at that and said, what would a new pool look like and what are the options? That was where we started to get more in line with that 8 million, which is what also kind of coincided with ultimately our financing plan.
And just to go back one more step, just to make sure we're all saying the same thing, as a reminder, a couple things happened, right? The high school, the initial estimate on the high school increased significantly. And so we went back and we made some pretty significant adjustments to the high school, right? And then as part of that, we said a renovation to the pool would cost between $2.5 and $3 million. And I think everybody was on the same page. That didn't make a lot of sense to renovate a nearly 50-year-old pool at the time. But I do think that that's a little bit of the realization here that when you look at that 42 million, you have to understand that there were some things that were done in that 42 million that might not have been done in terms of cuts and things that were taken out. But it was a timing issue is really what it came down to. And so I just have to commend the group internally and Crabtree on the pace that we did this to go essentially from September, really, late August, September, to come up with this design and what we have.
I just don't want to say, oh, we have 8 million left, let's spend 8 million if, we all had in our mind it was around 5 or 6 million.
I'll just say this, anytime you get input into a project, I've never seen the cost go down.
Oh, okay.
And if everybody got what they wanted, it wouldn't have stopped at 8 million by any stretch of the imagination.
Well, we need to be thoughtful about that if we want to pursue this project or if we want to get rid of the pool in its entirety. I mean, that was part of the conversation. We are not locked into doing this pool if it's too expensive. At least I didn't think I was. Maybe the rest of the board feels locked into it.
So I would say as we kind of pivot from the financing plan and the money that we have available to us as far as funds, looking at the construction budget, I would say is more connected to the estimate based on the design that we've developed. And so as we come back to the board, this is the totality of the new pool based on what we've designed, and we'll talk a little bit more as the night progresses here about that design, what's included. But 7.8 million is where we're at in terms of the total construction budget or estimate that we expect based on the amounts that we've laid out in the design. The point I wanted to add here is the construction cost or project bids. That's the number that ultimately will be benchmarking if the board does decide to move forward with the bidding process. And so when we open bids on bid day, we would be comparing it against that $6.5 million number. But the bids are just for the prime contractors and their subcontractors. We know that the totality of a construction project also includes a variety of other things. And so that's some of those reconciling items that take us to 7.8 million. So.
Okay, so since we were here last, we made a lot of progress on the design of the pool and natatorium space. A couple things I want to point out in this drawing. First of all, just so everybody's clear on this concept is, for all practical purposes, an entirely new pool structure and new natatorium. So you see the two red arrows that are on the drawing? Starting at that red arrow on the left and working all the way around the whole building up to the arrow on the right is entirely new construction. So we'll be taking down the roof and the walls of the natatorium. We'll be digging out the pool, so the pool will be gone entirely. So that red square that you see in there represents the footprint of the existing pool, and the red line that you see going across the front is the current front wall of the natatorium. So you can see we're doubling the size of the natatorium space itself. So in this design, one of the big features of the concept is going from a 6-lane pool to an 8-lane pool. So we're adding 2 lanes. We're also widening the lanes. What you've got there now is again, it's a 6-lane pool, but they're narrow lanes. They're 6 foot wide. And in our current concept, we're doing 8 lanes that are 7.5 feet wide. So it does change the dynamics and the size of the pool. And by rotating it 90 degrees, it allows us to get the proper length and have everything fit within within a new footprint. So to enter the building, we're creating a separate public entry point. You see on the right-hand side. What you start to see in the right-hand side of that drawing is the curb line of the circle out in front of the building. So coming off that circle, we'll have a handicapped accessible route that is the sidewalk that kind of comes across the top and angles down and goes in through the public entrance. There will be a small grade change of about 2 feet from the finished floor elevation of the natatorium down to the sidewalk that's at the curb line. So there'll be a couple of steps and then a little bit of a bank, and we'll landscape that and make it look real nice to make a kind of a good curb appeal entrance to the natatorium. As you come into the space, you see we've got a large entryway with public restrooms left and right of that entryway before you then come into the natatorium itself. On the left side of the plan, you see a storage room and a pool equipment room. Anytime you do something like this, you do have a fair amount of storage requirements. You've got rope wheels, you've got equipment, you've got athletic items and stuff that are being used in the pool. So there's a large storage room there. Of course, the pool equipment room is for all of the filtration equipment and those kind of things. In the upper left-hand corner of the plan, you start to see entrance into locker facilities, and to the left of that, you see the pool locker rooms and shower areas, of course, coming in through the upper left. On the upper right, one important thing to note is the position of the entry coming in off of the school. You see that yellow corridor that is to the left of the high school flex space. The entrance point to the natatorium is actually shifting to the left a little bit, about 15 feet maybe. And the primary reason for that is because we have a hard wall there for the locker room, but it then gives us an extra space that we can use. We're calling it at this point high school flex space. It's really unassigned, it's more multi-purpose type space, but by moving that corridor to the left, it allows us to create a large space there instead of dividing it in half and having a small space left and right. So we're shifting that entrance point. And then we have a second storage room there, again, for more pool equipment, and there'd be kayaks and different things that need storage. And then a small office area in that upper right-hand corner. The spectator seating is located along that right side wall, so vertically up and down. And then the way that the pool is oriented, the blocks are at the lower end. You see it where it says deep end 12 feet. The blocks are at the lower end, and then you would swim toward the locker area and then come around for turn around and come back and end a 50-yard swim competition, let's say, back at the blocks. So you're swimming up and then back down toward the front wall. The deep end would be at the front wall. The shallow end would be at the wall closest to the existing school. And then along that top section, what we have, you're seeing, they're not really bleachers per se, and we're still kind of in the design process of that, but we're showing some bench type seating in there, which might be a gathering space for the teams to collect. We're working with the athletic department to try to determine whether or not they want fixed seating in there or whether they want just flexible, movable seating. That's kind of to be determined at this point, but it's a pretty simple part of the project. Right now, we're just simply showing a placeholder of some seating in there for a place for the teams to sit. That's kind of a quick overview of the concept of the layout. Questions on the layout?
So I know we had discussed the diving well. Is that included in this or?
There is a depth of 12 feet, which will allow for 1 meter springboard diving. It's not really a diving well per se. It's 1 meter springboard diving that could be accommodated. It's the kind of thing that, if you ever think you're going to do it, now's the time to at least build the depth. And we can put foundations in to put the boards on at a future time. But it would allow for 1 meter springboard diving,
Okay.
yes.
And a second question, does this expanded pool increase the footprint of the overall project?
The overall,
The overall high school?
yes, it does. Yeah, the red line that you see that kind of cuts the natatorium in half is the front wall of the current
Right.
natatorium. So everything south of that red wall is new square footage or additional square footage to what exists today, let's say.
And maybe this isn't the time to address this now. I'm not really good at conceptually viewing some of those. I know this project has been impeding on our current track arrangement, I think, or at least temporarily. Does this impact that at all?
This is in the front of the building.
The
track
is-
the track is behind.
at the track for high school project too, like all the equipment is
So that's the
stopping us from.
equipment. This isn't, okay, so
Yeah,
this is at a different spot.
Yeah.
Okay. Like I said, I'm not really good at the.
Yeah.
The next
It's the
picture
front,
of the
it's,
site.
think of it as the
Sure.
front of the building.
Yeah. So this is the front of the building that you see from Broad Street.
Okay,
And the track is behind, in the back of the building,
got it.
So
near the WAC.
do
So
most,
that space is going out toward Broad?
For Broad Street.
Where the seniors usually get their pictures taken for the yearbook. It's right where the building will be.
Just to the left of the new main entrance.
Now they can all swim in the pool.
Okay,
that's
okay.
that's the curved driveway that you would drive in to drop your kids off in front.
All right.
Said another way, it's where the pool is currently, it's just larger.
Yeah.
Coming towards Broad Street.
Got it.
Yeah, it sticks out in the yard a little
Thank
bit.
you for-
Yeah, thank you.
No, that's all right.
So, 8 lanes, is that what other schools have, or are we
Yes.
short again?
That's very consistent with what other schools are having, yes.
So
Like
10 as
Dover, we just did a
well.
pool for Dover, they've got 8 lanes, and it's a 25-yard pool. So yes, very consistent.
This is a dumb question, but I just want to double check. You said people were going to be swimming uphill. You didn't mean that, Doug, did you?
Right. Not uphill, no.
Up the drawing.
Increase
Going up the
endurance.
drawing, yes.
It's better for endurance.
Water doesn't quite stay in as much if you're going swimming
Are
uphill
there
either.
underwater lights though?
Yes.
That you have to change, like
Yeah.
diving underneath.
I have a
Yeah.
section through it that'll make it a lot more, if there's no more questions on the plan, I can forward to the section. Okay. So that gives you an idea what the pool looks like from a sectional perspective. So in this particular diagram, what you're seeing is it's a 3-foot 6-inch deep shallow end with a 12-foot deep end. We are showing the springboards on there, but they're a future item. They're really there to indicate that we're putting a foundation system in for them to add it, but we're doing a diving depth basically for springboard diving. So it's 12 feet at the left, 3'6" at the right. What's important to note here, though, you see the blue shaded area. What's important is that is indicating where it gets to the point beyond 5 feet. So up to that blue line is, less than 5 feet to the right. So what you've got basically, the pool dimensions are 75 feet long, 25 yards, and it's 60 feet wide. So the shallow depth, let's call it for community use, for swim lessons, for those kind of things, is 33 long by 60 wide, which is roughly about 2,000 square feet. So it's fairly large as an area for community use for lessons and those kind of things before you start getting into a point where we're deeper than 5 feet.
How's,
Thanks.
if you know, how's that relate to the current pool? Like,
It's the old
beginner
pool. It's more.
It's essentially the size of the old pool, yeah.
So actually, we're gaining what would be like elementary space or
Sure.
beginner space.
Oh, absolutely. So yeah, if I was just to back up real quick and look at that diagram, you can see the size of the old pool.
Yeah, like,
Now the old pool is all shallow. And,
Right.
right.
Correct. That's a good way to put it, yes, excellent.
So we're actually gaining shower space.
Absolutely, yes, yes.
Tremendously.
What's
It's
that?
about 2,000 square feet, yeah.
Zero entry lane or something that was in the
Yeah.
last?
Yeah, if you look at the plan, let me back up again. On the left-hand side, you see that lane that goes up the left-hand edge. That's a handicapped accessible ramp, zero entry, basically. You can roll in there or walk in along that ramp for handicapped accessibility.
Are we having one of those things you can put a wheelchair thing in?
You have one of those now, but you don't necessarily need it with this.
So this actually runs all the way down.
This replaces that, but there's no reason you couldn't also have that if you
How do
wanted
they get
to.
out?
Huh?
How do they get out?
They come right up the ramp. It's a ramp.
There they actually go.
Somebody's pushing them, or, I mean, you're taking them in a wheelchair and you're
Oh,
rolling them
I
down a wheelchair
understand that,
until
but
they
I
can
just
float
wonder
out.
if you've ever pushed somebody in a wheelchair uphill.
Yes.
So from a seating perspective, how much additional spectator seating?
Right now, I think we're showing 225 spectator seats.
And we now currently have.
I think right now what you've got is about what's equivalent to across that top section where I was calling team seating. That's about the extent you have, and I think if I'm not mistaken, it was 125, does that sound right? I know we did some analysis on that, and I think you've currently got about 125. I forget the exact number, I apologize.
Over doubled it slightly.
We've about doubled the seating capacity, correct? Correct.
And that would be comparable to other schools? I mean, not that that's important, but
I would say yes, and we did have discussions with Mr. Pahanic, for example, and Tug, and we've talked about it. We've had several meetings with stakeholders and talked about the numbers of people that come to typical swimming events. And also keep in mind, a swimming event is kind of an all-day affair, and what happens is they come in, they watch their kid for 3 minutes, and then they go out and they're sitting somewhere else. So,
I
You know,
guess
there's-
a better way, that meets our needs. I don't care so much about what other.
yeah, of course.
Comparable.
Yeah, I believe it meets your needs, yes.
For the expanded facility, more potential
Sure.
activities that it meets.
Everything we've researched and talked to people, talked to stakeholders, we feel like this is more than adequate for your seating capacity needs and to handle a large swim event in your, in this natatorium.
Because of the rotation.
Yes.
So when you're expecting the parents to leave after their 3-minute swim, where do you think they're going to be hanging out?
Well, I don't know if this is going to shine on the board. I don't think it really, you can sort of see it. So right here is, you see where that red dot is up top? Okay, that is that open collaboration space in the high school that has the, the flexible seating in it. And this is the hallway that goes up past the gymnasium. This is the hallway that comes out past, kind of between the auditorium and the administration area. This is going to be a pretty populated hangout space, I would believe, where you've got that flexible seating and people are going to be in and out and sort of, I hate to say it, but camping out in the hallway.
So,
I mean, that's pretty common.
like, there's not going to be a closed doors, so they can't get into the school that far.
There are, yeah, the hallways do have closed doors in them, so you can close off sections of the building. That's inherent in the building design, yes.
Right, but I mean, would we encourage people to go that far away from the pool though?
That's where they have to
I
come
mean,
in
I was
anyway.
gonna say, right now, they hang out in the auxiliary gym.
Right.
They have to come down, they have to come in the student lot and in that other entrance.
They're coming down here from the student lot, coming right down this hallway.
Or,
Or entering here, of course, yes.
Yeah, so-
Entering, it's not showing up really, entering right here. But a large number of the people will be entering in that back lot, like on a basketball game, for example. They'll be coming down past the gym and coming right in, down this hallway and in through this ramped entrance.
That led to my question. You were talking about a ramp entrance. The pool now is like 8 steps down from
Correct.
everything.
We are
We're talking about
raising
all
it
this.
a little higher than it is today, but it'll still be lower than the main elevation of the school. So there will still be a ramp that comes down. The ramp, let me see if sorry, wrong button. The ramp starts right here and it comes down to right there. So this is a little bit of a ramp right here to get down to the elevation of the pool.
Mr. Haynes, worth mentioning, I don't think we mentioned yet the public entry, because I think that's
Right here.
a piece that
Yes,
doesn't exist at all right now, and I don't.
correct.
Might speak to some of the questions you guys are asking, that now we'll have a new exterior entrance directly into the pool, so the hope would be that many spectators will be using that to come in and out, and won't have to go into the high
Yeah,
school.
certainly people that are parking in the, in what is the staff parking lot over here, okay, it's out of the picture. They would be coming across and coming in through this entrance. People that are parking in the back student lot would likely come in through the new main entrance of the 2-story addition, come down the hallway past the gym and come in through that ramp.
I have one other question on that.
Sure.
Sorry, I have to go back.
On the plan? Sure,
On the
absolutely.
plan, sorry. What's the white line near the deep end, or in the deep end, but near the blocks?
The white line?
Yeah. Crosses right near the end of the, there's a part of the,
You know, I'm not a swim expert. I'm not 100% sure, but what I think it is an indicator for the flip turn. I think as you come in, you come across that line, but again, I'm saying that not entirely sure that that's the right answer. Actually, on the lanes, you can see the little T, it's a little further than that, so I'm honestly not sure. That might be a printing
I
error.
meant the,
I think it's a printing error.
It might be a printing error, actually.
Actually, if you take one more
So-
step and you're really.
Yeah, why
Yeah.
too many layers?
If you actually look at the front of this, you can see the little T's at the end, so I was wrong, it's not that. It's the little T's at the end of the lane lines. It's probably a printing error.
Okay, that's fine. You mentioned that the diving boards are not included in this. Why not?
Well, I mean, they could be. Right now, there was a lot of discussion whether they should be or shouldn't be,
Yeah,
and
the issue is right now, we don't have a diving team, and we don't have a great deal of interest from the people responsible for this, including our rec director and our athletic director, to do anything with diving. So to build the capacity for it made sense, but to deal with what we would have to deal with from a diving perspective, I think is a separate conversation.
Even for other groups who use the facility, right?
Well, I think you have a lot of concerns, around diving. You're gonna need some training about what does that look like. We have to understand, we use this for phys ed class, high school phys ed classes too, and so, where are our phys ed teachers with that? We don't have the head of the phys ed department asking for diving or wanting to
Right.
use that.
Right.
So I just think it's kind of like saying to the science department, here, we want you to do this lab because we want you to figure out how to make it work, and we're just not getting that from our people internally.
Is that because we didn't have diving before?
It could be, absolutely, and that's why we decided that we want to build the infrastructure for this, because it'd be silly to build a pool like this and not consider that for the future, but it's not where our people are right now. But again, that's something that the board has to decide. Just so you know, to put the diving boards in, the simple cost of that is about $15,000.
about $15,000. Yeah.
But I think what we would have to do operationally is we're gonna have to have a lot of internal conversations about what does that mean? And I don't think that's a higher priority right now as it is for some.
How many boards were you gonna put, like, the foundations for? Is it
For two.
one or two?
Traditionally, too, yeah.
I mean, I think it's an easy conversation with the head of PE to say, walk around the diving boards and just do the rest of your, like, what you're doing otherwise. Like, they kind of, like, they can sit there, not being used. I feel like for 15 grand, it's kind of like getting a car without the, like, power windows or, like, the stereo or something. And then a couple years from now, if we're gonna put them in later, it's gonna be not 15 grand. So that's my
Yeah.
thought on that.
I don't think it's the money. I don't think with an $8 million project, we're worried about the 15 grand. It never came up that way. It was more of a programming
Okay.
piece.
And
I was just gonna mention, maybe to even as what Dr. Lighty was sharing, I think we still preserve the option one way or the other. I think so, at least as we're looking at the pool, we're not hamstringing ourselves for a decision that maybe might come 5 or 10 or 15 years down the road. Because we will have the deep end ultimately, and the structural pieces will be there, and so at least we've equipped so that the future decision could be made if that programmatic need ever came to fruition.
Well, it wasn't really the primary crux of the discussion. Some of our discussions did circle around safety also, because now if they're there and you've got community using them, or the community jumping off of them, does it become a safety problem? I mean, there's just a whole host of other discussions that have to be had to, I think, ultimately land on that decision.
Don't the board pieces, can you like lift them up?
They do, they have types that can lift up, yeah, they do have a variety of different styles, yes, for sure. Yeah.
Insurance wise, is it like more?
I'm sure there's an insurance implication, but I don't see this as a monetary issue. I really don't. I mean, it's $15,000. I'm not saying that's nothing. It is money. But this is more about we have a rec director, we have an athletic director, we have an individual responsible for the phys ed department, and not one of them have endorsed this. So I'm just coming to you with a recommendation, like we've done with over $100 million worth of projects, the
I
same
like to die,
process.
so I don't know why.
I think there's more special interest in this project than the other $100 and some million that we've done.
Well, I think too, though, it more affects the public, all the public, which does put it somewhat more out to the board. I mean, you made it clear from the beginning, from like an academic point of what you need for usage, and therefore, more of this falls to the public, which is who we represent. And I think that's why there's so much interest in it.
Sure.
When we listen to the constituents saying like, why aren't you gonna put, if you're gonna do this, why don't you put the diving boards in, or why are you doing it at all? You know, that kind of thing. That's more than we do on the academic side. It's much easier to justify that, you know what you want to do, work.
So the blocks, I recall that being an issue before. I think that we didn't pay for the blocks, that the Booster Club ended up paying for the blocks. So what's happening with the blocks that the Booster Club paid for, and then are we putting in blocks?
That's a good question, Mrs. Marison. So it actually was, it was timely that as we started to look at the high school and where we were, because of, as we looked at kind of the structural, some of the structural analysis around the pool and maybe what some repairs might be needed, and then knowing that we were starting to look at the renovation in totality, we actually ended up holding off on the blocks. And so that was part of a conversation to say, when we do put the blocks in, what specifications and what type of blocks do we need? And so that's part of the project. But to your point, it was very timely that we were able to actually hit pause on that. And so we didn't move forward with the blocks. And so we won't be undoing any work that, maybe we would have done otherwise. So.
But yet then they'll be happy with the new.
Well, they gotta raise money for 2 more blocks now, so we got.
Are you reusing
Just
them?
kidding.
What's
Are
that?
you reusing the ones they already bought?
So they hadn't actually bought the blocks because we were really close to moving forward with the blocks, but then we started to do some structural analysis, and we were talking about, from a capital reserve perspective, maybe what were some needs in that pool area. Simultaneously, we were starting the conversation about what are the needs at the high school with renovation, and so because of all that was circulating around, these different issues, we did end up hitting pause on the blocks, and so we did try to incorporate that into this conversation and say, what are the needs around type of blocks and things that we install?
So are you saying that they're included in here?
Yes, sorry, I have a long way to say that.
So if we were gonna value engineer this, kind of like we did the high school where we cut like $3 million from the high school, maybe more. If you had to cut $1 million, what would go with this project?
Or has it already been value engineered?
Water.
Well, we looked at the option of not having a pool of that depth, and that difference is about $250,000.
About 250, yeah.
There is, again, not a recommendation because is that forward thinking or not, but that would be one thing. I think, the question about 8 lanes versus 6 lanes, there's a possibility. So there are ways to reduce it. I don't know if you have other suggestions on that.
I mean, when you see some of the renderings, it actually is a fairly straightforward design. There's not a lot of, it's very nice. I don't want to say it's not nice, but there's not a lot of things in there that I would say there's a great opportunity for some value engineering. We took a very practical approach to the building from the start, which we always do. Okay, so we kind of value engineer along the way, which then makes it a little more challenging if we do have a budget problem to then value engineer, because we've kind of done it from the start. But again, that's not to say that it's because it's really an exciting looking building when you see it.
You would really have to go to the footprint of the building.
You would have to change the footprint of the building and change the footprint of the pool. That's really what you'd have to do. You'd have to reduce the size of the pool.
Are the bleachers like concrete steps like they are now?
Yes. Yep. They would have seats on them. They would have actually similar to like a bleacher seat in the stadium, but they would be concrete with bleacher seats sitting on top of them. So you're not sitting on concrete.
In our current program, as I understand it, limits our water polo. It's not quite like it should be if it was a right pool. I'm not full of all the details on that, but this solutions that.
Not entirely. Again, it's because it's a 25-yard pool and we're trying to build community use in the shallow end. If you take 33 feet and you subtract it from the 75 feet, you're looking at 42 feet. 42 feet is from that blue line over to the far wall, times 60 feet is not a PIAA water polo area, but most schools have a pool exactly the size, and they do have their water polo teams play in that size. An alternative would be to allow them to come into the shallow end, but then they have the opportunity to touch the floor and all that kind of stuff. But if you're going to stick within a 5-foot limit, you're looking at a 42 by 60 foot, let's call it court. I don't know if that's the right word or not, but water polo court. And that's what most schools are actually doing, because this is a very standard sized pool for a school.
I think said another way, the ideal water polo pool is one that is at a depth that nobody would ever touch the ground.
Right.
But very few schools have that because they have shallow ends as well. So
Right.
the only limitation is that there is a shallow end on the court. But again, that's pretty typical, and the referees are used to having to watch for players that are jumping off the floor.
And I think Mr. Bitts raises a good point, and I think if you think about, do you have a shallow end or a pool of all the same depth, then you start to go back to those 4 stakeholder groups of the program, the athletics, the recreation and community, and then each one of those 4 groups probably has different ideal needs or unique needs maybe, and so if you're teaching people to swim, then the shallow end and the zero entry and those things all help, but then maybe not, we can still play water polo in this pool, but I think, that's where it all comes together.
We're not going to meet all those needs for under $8 million.
Right.
By any stretch.
I think that's a good example of the value engineering that we're talking about. I mentioned that, like, to start off, the other consideration of what I was wondering, that extra spot, was that a bulkhead for a more dedicated diving area? It didn't look right for that, and that's why I was confused by it. But like, that's another thing that you could have extended the pool further, and if we had the space and the money, and you could have added to more dedicate to diving or to practice without interfering with the rest of the pool. But like, that's not
Or
feasible.
to a standard water polo.
Or do that, yeah, exactly,
Right.
yeah, so.
But that's already been done. I mean,
To do that, you're getting into a movable bulkhead. at
Yes,
that
that's
point.
what, yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah, I know a lot of your collegiate pools are that way.
Right.
And also, bringing up this with the water polo, if it would be all shallow, then we would not have water polo, correct? Or that's kind of an unanswered.
Just raise that same issue across the
Yeah.
whole.
But generally, where schools have water polo teams, they do have a deep end where they,
Mhm.
especially
Yeah.
with a new pool.
One of the alternatives we looked at, which would not be obviously springboard diving depth, would be the deep end, instead of being 12 feet, would have been 6'6". So now that's certainly, would be tough to touch the bottom, let's say, in a water polo situation, okay? 6'6" is plenty deep. It would be, then you would have the 6'6" depth times the 60-foot width of the pool. But then you're limiting yourself to ever having diving in it because you don't have that proper depth. And the analysis by our consultant was, it's about a $250,000 add, because really, when you think about it, the surface area is the same. All you're doing is stretching the walls by about 6 feet. So it's not really adding a lot of construction value. It's mostly water.
So have we done any research? Is there a rock out there that we have to dig that deep?
We haven't done that research necessarily because it's inside of a building. So we can't really do drilling on the inside of the building necessarily. But the one difference here is your current pool is basically, I guess, to put it in simple terms, it's not exactly this, but you've essentially got a basement below that pool because all the equipment is underneath. So your hole that is there for the current pool isn't all pool, it's got space below it. Here, this is a slab on grade pool. So, I believe you're actually, even though you're making a deeper pool, I believe that you're raising the bottom of the pool up. You're not excavating down, you're bringing the bottom up. So you're not going to hit rock in that area. Huh?
Is the grade sloping out front there?
Well, you're going to have some excavation out on the front end where you're putting the new, like the addition to the natatorium, but most of where that pool is today is deeper than what you're going to have in this scenario. Again, I'm not going to say you can't hit rock. You certainly can hit rock in that front yard, but rock has not been a huge issue on this site.
Tracy, we are gonna do some test borings for footings out there. So we'll have some indication.
Thank you.
So what does it look like? Okay, what this is now, this is kind of a long distance shot. On the right-hand side, what you're looking at there, really the primary element of this particular rendering is the new main entrance that just got recently built. So you see the entrance and you see the student services addition on the front. The pool is, of course, what you see in the far background. You're seeing the two entry doors into the pool with a canopy over top of the door. But that's kind of a view as you're coming around the driveway, the circular driveway, passing the addition on the right. But close up, that's more of a view of the pool. So you see at the deep end of the pool, a large wall of windows. Those windows that you see there, the design of those windows are very consistent with the windows that are in the new two-story classroom addition. So it's the same kind of concept, same patterning of glass. So it's very consistent with the new addition we just built. You see again on the right-hand side, the main entrance. And then the two masses below to the left and right of that main entrance are the public restrooms. And then this door that you see right here is the existing door that goes in, kind of past, this is Mr. Harris's office, and it goes past here and into the school. That's the hallway into the school. And then, of course, the windows, and this sidewalk comes out across the front and is a accessible sidewalk, really more for egress. There's doors on the back corner of this building that then allow you to get emergency egress by handicapped out of the building. So that's kind of a view of the exterior of the building. Again, as you can see, fairly simple, fairly straightforward. The focus is really on the glass that faces Broad Street.
That's what I need to see before.
What's that?
I got
Right.
it now. That's
It's in color, you can see.
So now we're standing inside the natatorium, obviously, and my back is to the upper left-hand corner in the plan. So coming out of the locker rooms, that's kind of where this is what I would see as I'm coming out of the locker rooms, looking toward the public entrance that you see here, and then of course toward the windows that you see in the front. This is the deep end out across the back here. This is the shallow end, and these are the concrete benches I said about the teams, and then of course the spectators seating across the back side. But it's a nice, bright, wide open space. A lot of, the logos and you start to see some sound panels that we're incorporating into the design, into the structure, just to allow sound reverberation to not be an issue. And then looking the other direction, now I'm coming in at that other opposite corner, so the glass wall is to my back, and I'm looking toward the entrance into the locker rooms is right here. So we kind of played with some graphics across the front and put wildcats on the wall that is kind of between the different tectum panels for the sound isolation, just trying to put some identity of the school into the design, and of course, the Wildcat logo. And we've got a scoreboard here, and there'll actually be record boards on the wall. They're not shown up in the menu, in the rendering, but there'll be record boards there, and then kind of between the panels on here, we're looking at opportunities for banners and those kind of things. So it's a very nice, bright, open, wide space. Lots of light coming into it. But that's the concept of the interior rendering. Oh, what's that?
Much brighter than the current.
Yeah.
There
So
are
any questions on the interior architecture or the renderings?
What's the story with like ventilation? And I mean, I imagine I was in Elmwood this weekend, and the big tube over the gym that we just put in, and like it worse than an auditorium.
Right.
Yeah.
There's a mechanical system on the roof of this, and it's what they call a pool pack. So it basically is a specially designed ventilation system that sucks all the chlorine and all the stuff out. It's all sucked up through the roof into a pool pack, and then which is in addition to the standard HVAC system. It's designed specifically to deal with chlorine vapors and those kind of things. That'll be up on the roof.
But it's in the price.
Oh, yes. It's all part of the pool. Yes, part of the project.
Maintenance fee to keep this up, I know I see invoices from people having to come to the pool all the time. Do you see that increasing by 2 or about? I mean, is there more maintenance that we would have to have, people come here and check things out? Or?
So as it is now, Mr. Eisenhower is part of the team that helps take care of the pool, who we appoint annually. And then we do have some of the other maintenance piece, like when they clean the filters out, probably what you're referring to, some of the chemicals and things like that. I think we'd have to go back and just try to quantify that as an estimate, maybe come back to the board to answer that a little more accurately.
I mean, just the sheer size of it, you're gonna have some additional costs, and then hopefully, we're also picking up some efficiencies with newer equipment too, that will help. So it's tough to say.
And we actually did do some of that analysis, working with Weston and Sampson, because of some of the discussions that we had about the depth of the pool, the 6'6" versus the 12. Looking at, let's take the existing pool out of it for a moment. Let's just look at the two different options that we had studied for the new pool. According to Weston and Sampson, the difference, because not only was the $250,000 to increase the height of the walls and make the pool deeper, there's theoretically, more chemicals required because you've got more water, there's more energy involved to keep the, the temperature. It wasn't significant, believe it or not. It was about 5 to 8% is what Weston and Sampson said on an annual basis. To go to the deeper pool, it wasn't like you were doubling the cost of running the pool systems. It was about 5 to 8%, they said. But what they actually said is because of the efficiency gained in the newer equipment as opposed to what you have, your operating expenses, and again, I'm not talking the natatorium itself, I'm talking the pool and the pool systems, were about comparable, they said, to what you're doing today. So yes, it's a bigger pool, yes, there's more volume, but the equipment is much more efficient. So overall, they kind of said that you're going to be looking at roughly the same operating expenses for the pool systems.
Like an annual.
Yes, on an annual basis, yes. Now, of course, you've got a larger natatorium, so you're going to have, more heat and more air conditioning, but the pool itself. Okay. All right, so moving on, timeline. Do you want to cover that, or you want me to cover that?
Yeah, so the update here for the board this evening, really with the goal that we'll continue to refine, as the design's been refined, we're going to continue to refine the construction documents and the bid documents is what we would actually then submit out for interested contractors to review and bid on. We would ultimately be seeking the board's consideration for authorizing bidding at April 11th board meeting. Review the bid results then at the May Finance and Facilities Committee, and then assuming everything holds the way we would want, we would be awarding bids at the June 13th board meeting, and then ground being broken later that summer with substantial completion occurring about October 15th, 2024. And so for perspective's sake, the timeline runs a little bit parallel to the timeline that's happening for the existing renovation of the high school. And so while we're still working on the existing building, we'll be working on this side by side in the pool area.
So does the community know that the pool's not going to be available for over a year here, like other programs and stuff?
Yeah. So we've had some initial conversations with stakeholders, and I know the high school has made those efforts. As far as like a widespread community message, I think we would probably couch that in some of the other conversations we have about what's happening at the high school and what facilities are available. It's a good question, but I would say the stakeholders are closest to the project. We've talked to about that.
Regarding the substantial completion date, it's actually about 2 months ahead of Project 2's completion date, and we're doing that specifically to try to target the swim season. So we feel like it's a reasonable schedule. The Project 2 ends in December, right before Christmas, so we're trying to advance the timing of the schedule of this to try to get in so that we minimize the amount of impact to the stakeholders.
Well, you said it was going to be easy to do.
If it's a whole separate group of contractors working separately from the rest of the project, why would it take over a year?
There's a lot of lead times associated with equipment and those kind of things. I mean, there's only so far you can compress a schedule, but to do basically a 15 or 16 month schedule is reasonable for a project of this scope. You certainly do run the risk of having a different set of contractors. I think in all likelihood, you're going to get the same types of bidders that you've been getting on your projects, because I know the pool of contractors that have been very successful at bidding your work loves bidding Mechanicsburg work, so they tend to do it, at a pretty competitive rate, I guess, let's call it. But you look at the phasing of the current project, where this is matching on, if the board would decide to proceed with this, where this is going on to the building, is actually one of the earlier phases. So the contractors will be the current contractors will be out away from this area. They can work very independently if you ended up with, let's say, a different contractor pool on this than you have on your current project. They're not going to get in each other's way.
I like, from my perspective, when you answer the question, Mr. Castor nods behind you. It just adds this extra, like, it's like a.
Is he nodding?
Oh, that's
Only
sounds really good.
sometimes.
As long as it's not nodding this way.
He did gasp once or twice.
Huh?
He did gasp once or
Oh,
twice
did he?
when he was saying
Okay.
something, but we ignored it.
Anyway,
So like how much equipment's underground now that, I mean, that gets all taken out and,
it gets taken out. Yeah, the equipment is all in that equipment room, so we don't have an underground system any longer. It's a slab on grade pool.
we will have a slab.
You will have a slab on
Okay.
grade. What you have now is a system that everything's under the pool.
So, and we can haul all that stuff out in the way.
Correct. Yeah. Yep. So with that, any additional questions? We kind of ran through a whole bunch of them already, but
I just want, so I can catch up with the two board members that couldn't make it, I just want to clarify a point on these diving boards is, really, it's not important. I mean, if the board wants to move forward with the pool as presented, they can be added at any time.
The infrastructure for putting them in and the depth of the pool allows them
Right.
to be.
I just don't want this to get, that something everybody starts dwelling on as far as, and then holds the project up. It's at any time the administration comes and says, we want to put them in and buy them, or the board says, we want you to put them in. At any time, that could be added to the project, either before it was done or 5 years later. It's clearly a
Yeah.
separate item, ready
absolutely,
to bolt in.
that's correct.
We purposely designed it so they could be added.
Gotcha.
And it's just not the administrative recommendation right now to add them, but.
I just don't want to see this get delayed for
Yep.
2 months or 3 months or
Right.
a year as people debate back and forth whether we should put diving boards in immediately.
Mhm.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other, like, thoughts or reservations on the scope of this and what we need to discuss for the next, when we do come to a vote? We're mostly here. All right,
I mean, I support moving it forward.
good. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much. I really
Thank you.
appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, Brian.
That concludes that meeting.
Dr. Rhodes?
Yeah, you're gonna try to.